Thank you, Madam Chair, Chair Klobuchar, and also Ranking Member Blunt for having this hearing today, and to my colleagues, Senator Manchin and Senator Collins, for testifying. I want to thank Senator Warner as well, as a member of the group/gang, or whatever we're calling ourselves, and everybody else in this committee. We've had several hearings on this issue. I'm going to make a statement, and with the time I have left, I hope I have time to ask one question. But I want to thank the witnesses today, not just for what you're doing here today, but what you're lending of support and expertise throughout this entire process. We did labor back and forth on the best way, and I'm really encouraged by what I hear. I would also like to submit for the record a letter of support from the R Street Institute, who's in support of the ECA reform efforts. Without objection, I'll put that in there. One of the most important duties of members of Congress is to certify the winner of presidential elections. It's not our job to adjudicate lawfully cast ballots or overturn the will of the American voters. I remain a strong supporter of our electoral system, which provides power to the states to tailor their election laws to the specific needs of their citizens. As federally elected officials, we must respect the constitutional role reserved for the states and not abuse our oversight powers, which I think this bill lines out. I'm proud to have joined 15 of my colleagues from both sides of the aisle in introducing the Electoral Count Reform and Presidential Transition Improvement Act. This legislation is the only bipartisan bill that would amend the Electoral Count Act of 1887. January 6th was a dark day here in our Capitol and for our democracy, but the politicization of the counting of electoral votes has been a problem for decades, predating the most recent presidential certification. Members of Congress have objected to certified electoral results as a means of changing political outcomes of electoral results that they don't like. Despite then President George Bush's clear win over then Senator John Kerry, the concurrence with several House members of a single senator forced a vote in both chambers over whether to overturn Ohio's electoral results. Because of the rules set by the Electoral Count Act, which required just a single member, and I'm glad to see that we have on record that we all believe that that is a flawed proposition. Senator Barbara Boxer's objection forced Congress to deliberate on whether to discredit the popular vote of the state of Ohio. This resulted in a vote of 1 to 74 in the Senate and 31 to 267 in the House of Representatives. In 2017, House Democrats tried to object to results in 9 states to contest President Trump's electoral victory. Had a single senator had the bad sense to sign these objections, we would have been required to law to vote on these frivolous changes. These precedents, along with efforts to pressure Vice President Pence to discredit the lawfully cast ballots of certain voters, demonstrates the clear need for reform in this certification. Over the course of 7 months, we've worked on this, and I'm proud that we've put together a package that I think can use improvements and tweaks, as we've talked about, but also hits at the core issues. The legislation solely solves efforts to subvert lawfully given electoral results in our presidential elections and provide clear guidelines. I think clarity is sort of the word of the day. Clarity is what we have been missing for over those 100 years. It's not a partisan power grab to federalize our elections or use congressional levels of powers to dictate what outcomes a single party might prefer. These efforts, these legislative reforms, offer a common sense solution to a recurring problem. So in consultation with many of you, I'm hoping that this bill can gain enough support to pass both chambers and be signed into law by the President. I would like to ask in my remaining short period of time, I feel quite honestly, and I don't know what the chair feels about this, that we have a sense of urgency here. Let's be real, we're several months away from a midterm election. But as soon as we turn the corner into January, we're into another lengthy 2-year presidential election. My personal feeling is we need to button this up before the end of the year because that will then set the clarity to move forward for the next election. So I know I might get the answer that none of you think that you can tell Congress when they should and how they should pass things. But since you're all here in your personal capacities, I'd like to know if you have an opinion on the urgency to get this wrapped up by the end of the year. Mr. Gore, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Senator. I wouldn't presume to tell Congress
I knew you'd say that.
or how to act, but I certainly agree that now is the time to act. The
Yes.
Reform Act is a beneficial piece of legislation. It makes a number of improvements. It's pending before the Congress now, and the moment is here for Congress to act and adopt these important reforms.
Thank you. Ambassador Eisen, I would like to say on a personal privilege. I enjoyed visiting you when you were the ambassador. Thank you for your hospitality. It's nice to see you again.
I was thinking back to the nice and bipartisan time that we had
did have a
in
good
Prague. I think it is urgent. We must seize the moment, but we must seize it correctly, taking account. And I know no one feels more strongly than you do, Senator Moore Capito, taking account of the needs of those state officials who actually are going to have to deal with all this. They need more time.
Right. Mr. Miller?
Yeah, I want to echo the point on the states, because the more lead time you give them, saying these are the rules, these are the deadlines, this is what your courts have to resolve in a speedy time, this is when the certifications have to take place, and there's so much that has to happen behind the scenes in the 50 states. The more lead time we give our hardworking election officials in the states, the better.
Thank you. Mr. Bauer?
I share the expressions of humility about weighing in on when Congress should act, but I could not agree more that it's urgent. And I would certainly be, I'll put it this way, delighted to see and think it would be good to see Congress act before the presidential election cycle begins.
Thank you. And Ms. Nelson?
Yes, I concur with my colleagues. This is urgent reform that's needed. And by Congress advancing this as soon as possible, it frees Congress up to do more to protect our elections and to enact other legislation that will complement and enhance the ECRA.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Capito.